Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jessey Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jessey here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got an awesome guest here, somebody who's well in the depths of land, not only with his own land business, but helping others as well. Clay Hepler here is to share with us everything from scaling to profits to the state of the industry. He's going to be as honest as possible on this episode here. He's also got a special announcement on a project that he's working on, and I think everybody that is listening will hugely benefit from. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this episode here with Clay. All right, we've got our guest here, Clay Hepler. I've had you on the show a couple times before, but I'm excited to have you back. You're super involved in the space of land. I wanted to bring you back to share with us what's going on with you, also what's going on in terms of the industry, the state of land right now. But why don't you give us an update? What's going on with you with your land business?
For those listeners that don't know me from your uncle, I have a couple other podcasts, one of which, Jessey, I have a co-host. His name is Justin Pichet, dear friend of mine, and another really incredible operator in the space. And we're actually reflecting on, a year of doing this podcast together. And it was interesting. He asked me the question at the beginning of the podcast. It's like, hey, how does your business look really differently today versus what it did in the past? And a lot of it was around standards and just being a better business operator. It's really interesting. Like, as I've gotten more and more into the business, it's becoming more and more exciting, and probably for the reasons that people don't actually talk about. Like, people talk about, hey, I'm scaling this business, I'm doing more deals, but like, it should be fun, man. Like, there's a grind aspect to this whole thing that is important. I think Jeff Bezos talks about overhead. So you have a percentage of what you're doing on a weekly basis or monthly basis that's overhead. And man, I just left a meeting before this podcast that, frankly, I'm like, I should not be in this meeting, but I'm hiring someone to help this, manage this meeting, and then all the actions that come out of it. But I think something that's really been interesting for me is like focusing on my unique ability, which is a strategic coach concept. Dan Sullivan, 10X is easier than 2X, Who Not How, all that book series. But like the things that are really my specialty that I need to focus on in order to drive value is something that I think for me, at least my first 3 years in land, like I didn't think about. I was just thinking about the grinding versus like where can I actually create the most amount of value in my business.
And is that where you're finding the excitement and the fun? So like, somebody who's starting off in land or has been operating a land business, how do they find their excitement? How do they find what's fun for them? Yeah.
Well, you got to make money first. So like that's the prerequisite. So for those that don't know me, like I've been able to build a business that is creating consistent profit, a net profit, and we should be doing a good number, probably in the neighborhood of the high $2 million of gross profit this year, potentially over $3 million, but depending. You never know in land. It could be kind of up and down. But I think that if I were to really distill this down, I would say like everyone has a certain bent that they're very, very good at, right? Something that you have this, maybe you're a salesperson, or maybe you can understand branding or marketing, or you can understand systems building. And you want to really lean into that because that is what your business looks like, right? And so I find people, and I work with a lot of people, private clients. One of your podcast guests is going to be one of my private clients, and people want to scale out of their business. And it's like, first of all, you can't scale out of a business that's doing 20 to 30K. You want to hire a bunch of VAs and expect them to take the burden of running a business off your plate. Even if it's a quote unquote lifestyle business, you need to be involved, I believe. They want to get to comfort. They want to get to convenience. And your business is this reflection of you that you bring into this world. Of course, it produces profit, but one of the most amazing parts about business is you actually can demonstrate who you are through it. And the more that you bring your unique self, because you are the employee that you cannot afford. People can't hire me, right? You can't hire me to be in your business. I'm the employee that I can't afford. I would ask too much, right? I would ask so much because I know what I'm worth, and a lot of the other land entrepreneurs should know what they're worth, right? But what I'm really trying to get at here is that I think the fun comes from understanding what you really are good at, and then getting into that, and that actually creates incredible amounts of value. I feel that the hustle culture and the this misrepresented understanding that land business is so easy, that combination of hustle culture and like land business is super easy, sets people up to have incredibly poor expectations. And so they build these prisons, which is what I work with a lot of people on, creating a dream business, not actually a prison. A dream business that produces profit, you still got to work hard, right? Like I'm not you build your dream business with this soul aligned thing and you don't never have to work another day in your life. But yeah, no, I know I said a lot there, Jesse, but that's kind of been really top of mind for me lately.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the listeners are wondering, okay, Clay, you said, before you sort of get into the fun stuff, you have to make money. You have to be profitable. What is that like? Can you give us some tangible threshold here? What should that be? What might that look like? Whatever your thoughts are on in terms of that.
For sure. So I hope this analogy is helpful. So imagine like you have a goal of like, hey, I want to lose 25 pounds, right? And your goal is I want to lose 25 pounds by this period of time. Just like your business goal would be, I want to make X amount of revenue, right? If you are a mercenary for your goal, which I am a mercenary for my goal, I do and believe that which moved me towards my goals, and all entrepreneurs should do that, right? You know that you need to do a certain number of steps, you need to work out in a certain way, you need to eat the right type of food, you need to get ample sleep, and you might need to supplement with some sort of things, right? You can do it in a lot of different ways to lose weight, but you pick a path to do it. Now, at first, that path is incredibly difficult, right? And so I find most land investors, in order to get that escape velocity, right? It's like Charlie Munger, I think, says the first $100,000 is the hardest. Or maybe the first $1 million is the hardest. And then once you get that escape velocity, once you build the foundations, you might have a system like a good CRM. You might have a good way of tracking KPIs. You might have the right team members. You get your core team members in. Then getting to the next level is so much easier. And that's where you really lean into play, right? But just like when you work out, right, that first time building the habit of getting into the gym, man, that's so much harder than the people that you look at and you're like, dude, their body's amazing, right? They've been doing it for 10 years because they've built the discipline. They actually enjoy it now. They enjoy the pain of the gym, right? And so that's the part of the business. You start to enjoy the artistry and the pain of going through the things that you need to do in order to get your outcome. But people start to enjoy the bench press, the squat, the bicep curl, whatever, right? When their body starts to get developed, I would say the same exact thing happens when you're chasing in your business your unique ability, the things that you're exceptionally good at. But I think too many people are like they think about the wrong goal, right? So they think about like, hey, I want to lose the weight, right? But I want to do it without having to play hard. And I want to like hire someone to lose the weight for me, i.e., I'm going to hire a bunch of VAs to run my business, and I'm going to expect that to get the result. And I'm not going to track my calories, i.e., I'm not going to have the right KPIs that I'm going to track, and I'm not going to have a good CRM, and I'm not going to have a good calling, right? So all these things, I hope this analogy is resonating. This is what I was specifically talking about.
So when we're talking about then hiring, is it a bad thing then to hire some VAs to help you out? What are your thoughts on that, especially when you're sort of, going through the grind and trying to get to escape velocity?
Yeah, the problem that I've made in the past is hiring based on emotions, not based on my calendar and my constraints. And so those are very different things, right? So you might think that you need this person because you have an emotional need. But the right thing to do in your business is to hire the person that takes the constraint off your plate. I'll give you a perfect example of like a lot of people want to hire a lead manager right away in their land business, right? And the reason why they want to hire a lead manager is because maybe they're a sales-based person. They're like, I don't really want to take those initial calls, those initial qualification calls. But we look at what they really need. And I did this with one of my clients. He's like, I think I need to hire an acquisition manager. And I was like, okay, like, walk me through that. Walk me through the process. And he's a successful guy. He's a corporate executive, and he wants to scale his land business. So we walked through the whole process. And we found out that the reason why he thought that he wanted to do that is because he actually didn't like the feeling of having to qualify people. And so he was dealing with an emotional feeling that caused him to think that he actually needed an acquisition manager when, in fact, he liked taking the offer calls. He just didn't like to qualify the people. And so instead of spending the money on hiring an acquisition manager and the effort on hiring an acquisition manager, instead we allocated his capital to hiring a lead manager and then hiring a executive assistant, general admin ops person. And that would have been equivalent to the lead manager and the the lead manager and the operations manager was the equivalent salary of the acquisition manager, but he bought back more of his time using the Dan Martell quote. And he also was able to focus on his genius, which was actually closing people. And so that's what I mean by hiring based on calendar and constraints versus emotions. And that's where I see a lot of people really mess up, man. I mean, people pay me a lot of money to help with finding that right allocation of their own time, energy, and capital. And as a business owner that our ability to succeed is directly proportionate to our ability to allocate our time, our resources, our company's resources, and our people, right? Those are the things.
So do you have a framework or some sort of a dialogue somebody can walk through in terms of a calendar constraint versus hiring through emotions? I love the way how you worded this. And it's funny enough, we're going through something like this internally right now as well. But how would you kind of walk through being very clear as to why you need that person?
Yeah. So the reason why entrepreneurs fail, and this is something that I took directly, I paid a pretty penny to fly to Los Angeles and spend a day with Tom Bilyeu in his $35 million mansion in Hollywood. And I don't know where he took this, but I learned this from him, which is the reason why entrepreneurs fail is they lie to themselves, and they get emotionally overwhelmed. Right? So the reason I found that I've made poor hiring decision was one of those two reasons. And building that self-awareness muscle is the leverage point of the 21st century, like knowing what you actually need and getting clarity. And unfortunately, ChatGPT is not going to be that person. Like, you can talk with ChatGPT to help you get to what you believe to be the right thing, but there's this kind of gut feeling that you get when you have an understanding of, no, that actually makes the most sense, that you have to work with and toil with on your own. So how do you know what the next person to hire is? It comes down to getting really clear on what your goals are, right? And then understanding, like, what's the actual thing that's preventing me from getting to those goals. And that's remarkably simple. But in order to know what the next step is, the next biggest constraint is, you can't lie to yourself, right? And then you also can't, get emotionally overwhelmed. Like I was talking about, like, oh my gosh, I have, I'm working 80-hour weeks and I need this person because of this reason. They're kind of dual. They kind of work in tandem. So to give a practical example, I think that could be helpful to the listeners. Is like, some people will come in and say that I actually like I like sales. I'll just give you an example. I like sales. I like doing sales, right? And they'll be like, they tell everyone that they like doing sales. They say that, hey, I actually like getting on calls with sellers. By the way, I'm speaking about me. I actually like getting on calls with sellers, and I actually do like getting on calls with sellers, but it's not the thing that I really love, that I'm very good at closing sellers, I'm better at other things, and my business needs me to do other things. And so I could lie to myself, and unless I really investigated that, I couldn't have pulled out the fact that I'm really good at talking with investors. I'm really good at putting together strategy. I'm actually very good at allocating my company's resources. I'm a very good leader of people and in kind of managing expectations of people. And so my company actually needs me to do that. But I could say, hey, I actually think that the true thing that I need to do is call sellers. But the reality is that's not true. But I lied to myself for a long time about that. And it wasn't like a surface lie. It was like a deep lie. It took me quite a long time to get over that. And I still had these feelings of like, I could do this selling better than my acquisition manager. And I actually think that. But 80% of this acquisition manager doing this is better than my 100%, because I can allocate my time and resources somewhere else that would get a higher return.
In terms of, explain to us, what does your day-to-day actually look like? I mean, you're leading a team, you're strategizing. I want this to be relatable to a lot of our listeners who are, day-to-day running a land business. So what does that look like for you? What does it look like for Clay?
Man, I hear this. I hear like people answer this question. It kind of infuriates me because like people are like, well, I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I'm like a really like literal person. And so I will get down exactly to tell you what I do. So I wake up quite early. Usually anywhere between 5 to 5:30. And I will work for about an hour and a half. And Monday, for example, this morning I was doing, I do getting things done. So I do a getting things done. I don't know if you know GTD, David Allen, but I do like a weekly review of like everything that happened over the weekend, like checking my emails, like adding things that were top of mind from my notes, capturing everything in my life in an inbox. Then I process my inbox. Then I schedule my week and focus on the most important things that I need to focus on. And then look at KPIs. I look at all my company's KPIs, all the insights from my company, and then prepare for my meetings. Like today, I have a ton of meetings. Monday, I just stack meetings. And so I'm just like in meetings back to back all day, drinking a ton of coffee and in meetings, and some interviews and things like that. And then Tuesday, it's usually like strategy and content creation. So a lot of reading, and like thinking about content, like what actually matters now, what's valuable to people. Where can I create content that actually creates action and execution? So Tuesday is usually a lot of its content. And then I have more meetings on Wednesday, and I don't have a lot of individual contributor stuff that I do during the week. It's more about managing people and resources. But then I'll have like one or two, maybe 3 important strategic projects, like the LandMan challenge, for example, that I'm doing a lot of like behind the scenes time and energy allocation towards. But it's usually like I'm like 5:30 to like 6:30 every day, Monday through Friday. And then weekends, or for the family, I'll sometimes work a little bit on Saturday, or Sunday morning very early. But that's what my schedule's like. I don't know if that's how you can poke and ask more questions, but that's kind of what it looks like.
So now tell us, how do you sort of divide up your different sort of companies that you have going on? I'm assuming you have a portion where you're working on your land business, a portion of it working with clients. You mentioned the LandMan challenge. We can talk a little bit about that afterwards, but what does that look like so people have an understanding?
Mm-hmm. My philosophy around that has changed over time. So originally it was like very linear thinking. It was originally like, okay, so I put in, and then this day I do this day I do this, and it all to me right now, like, it just comes down to solving the biggest problem, and I just allocate all my time to that. So any excess bandwidth that I have, it goes towards solving constraints. So for example, like, I look at the companies that I have, which they're very complementary. It's like they exist in it, like I just basically flip land, develop land, invest in land, and I work with some people on a one-on-one basis. So everything that I do internally, it's about like, how do I solve the biggest problems in the conveyor belt of the land business? And so it's like, what's the biggest problem right now and how do I solve it? And then any excess time, it just goes towards that. And then try to focus on the biggest revenue producing activities. For example, there are like these power laws, the 80-20 rules. I don't know if you've probably heard of the Pareto principle, whatever, but 4% of the things that you do yield 64% of your outcomes, which is like an insane statistic. And so I constantly try to audit what my 4% is, so that even though when I'm solving constraints, then I'm living within my 4% to solve the most important constraints. So like, I'm a CRO, I'm a revenue guy, so sales and marketing is like my 4%. And so whatever within the sales and marketing bucket, I'm focusing on to solve a constraint, then that's what I'm doing. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. On the land side of things, you're working with a lot of people, or a few people, and you're in the space as well. Help us set some expectations here. What does that look like right now? I think there's been a lot of misconception about land. And so, yeah, help us give us some reality as to what's going on in the space of land. What are you seeing in the state of the industry?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about marketing as I send some sort of inbound or outbound message, whether it's texting, cold calling, PPC, direct mail, calling brokers, and I get a return on that. And so if I send out direct mail, what's my return? If I send out text, calls, whatever. And I think a healthy return in general is like greater than a 4 to 5x return. And so like, that's all I think about. So if I'm spending $1, I should get 4 to 5x back. Anything below that, then it's like, how do I test to get this higher? And that's like the constant tinkering of the business. So I think the reason why people get marketing wrong is because they believe it's like this very static thing. They're like, I send out direct mail pieces, I get calls back. And it's not like that. And it will never be that way. And it will continue to be more competitive over time, because that's how our economy works. So it's all about just getting really good at your marketing channels and understanding like what the industry standards are for your financial metrics, and then testing for everything. And then everything comes down channel from that. But it's not that complicated. It's not something to be like overwhelmed by, because it's just like an ATM machine. Am I getting the right inputs to outputs? What can I tweak in order to do this better and get the return that I need to get out of my business?
How long does it take you to hone in on that testing? How long should it take somebody to really figure out their numbers if things are working out?
Well, there are a series of factors. I would say it depends on how much data you're collecting, but I would give any channel at least 6 months in order to play out. 6 months of... Is there a specific volume? There a specific volume? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, I can get into like assumptions. I'm just gonna assume things. Like, so don't take this as gospel. But like, for example, if you're texting, check with your attorney first of all. Second of all, 50,000 texts a month, I think for 6 months, you could probably do 2 deals a month with that. 2 to 3 deals, maybe, depending on how good you are. For a lot of people, that's like, it's an insane ROAS. I mean, texting still has the best ROAS, I believe, unless you're like very good at mail. I think the minimum amount of volume that you should do, even with a targeted approach on a monthly basis, is like 10,000 pieces of mail. And you might be asking yourself, wait, how is he coming up with these numbers? It's because if you're doing a deal a month, it could be random. But 2 to 3 deals a month, it starts to allow you to predict, right? So that's why 10,000 I find is like people can get between 5 to 7K in per mail or to a deal, depending on how good you are, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So if you do 10,000 to maybe 15,000, you should get 2 to 3 deals per month consistently in mail. And depending on your spread, like that's a 4 to 5x ROAS, 6x ROAS. Cold calling is depending. I think on average, like a cold calling agency, I've heard it's 1 in every 6 weeks you get a deal. I think that's relatively accurate. So if you have 1 caller, 1 in every 6 weeks is a good number, provided they're doing industry standard calling protocols. So, if you want 2 deals a month, you might need 3 callers or 4 callers, right? To get 2 to 3 deals a month. So those are just kind of 3 of the big channels for the listeners to mess around with.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate you making those assumptions for us. And you do have to have some sort of assumptions to sort of tell us some numbers here. What about in terms of like misconceptions? You mentioned it earlier, like you're really, you want to be honest about land and everything that is going on. What are some of the more common misconceptions you sort of typically hear with the clients that you're working with, that they come into working with you? Is there any sort of patterns that you see?
Yeah, I think that it sounds really good to talk about land as this is the easiest real estate asset class, which I still believe it is. And I've experienced to say that because I've flipped houses, I've wholesaled, I've bought multifamily properties, I've bird multifamily, I've done self-storage, I've done like working with syndications. So I've done a lot of different types of real estate. To be fair, I've never done industrial. But I still think it's an amazing asset class. I just think that it's like everyone talks about get rich quick. And I don't know if it's a product of like we're like our culture is like really mentally weak, or the gurus or there's a lot of gurus that sell the story of, hey, this is going to be pretty easy. You send out a bunch of mailers. I think that that's actually changing based on the time that I've been in the kind of public eye more. It's changing, which I think is good. People are being more realistic about this is a business. But I think those are the 2 core misconceptions. And I would say the last thing is people chase gross profit and they should chase net profit. And so everyone wants to scale their top line, but what actually matters is scaling bottom line. And that's just the kind of Lambo, lifestyle that people want to chase. And who cares, man? Like let's build a business that creates a life that we want. And that's the type of business that I want to build. And I think people are too focused on top line.
Love that. Thanks so much, Clay. Let's come back to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier. You mentioned something called the LandMan Challenge. I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about this. I've run challenges in the past. I love challenges, but this is completely different, I think. Help us understand what this is all about. I know this is a project you're working on.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited about this. So basically, I launched private coaching for a lot of people, and a a lot of people applied, and not a lot of people made, the cut to work with me directly, whether it was a fit psychologically, like, hey, I don't know if we're a good fit because I want to work with a couple of people, or monetarily. It's pretty expensive to get one-on-one attention because I come and play full out. But I thought, hey, it would be really interesting if I could take this and kind of disrupt the general guru industry, the education industry, because I don't make money off of courses. And so I built out all the kind of concepts that I talk about with my private clients. I built that out and created the LandMan Challenge, which is a 4-week course that is everything from marketing to acquisitions to choosing the right CRM to KPI management to consistency to scaling and funding. And it's all packaged together. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because, first of all, I think information is abundant, right? I can go and watch a bunch of YouTube videos and I know everything about information about how to start and scale a land business, but implementation is not. And so the purpose of the challenge is for implementation and accountability, because frankly, like, you can learn everything you need to know about how to build a land business on YouTube. And I, from a altruistic perspective, I think it's going to be really good for the industry. But from a personal perspective, I don't make money with selling courses. I don't sell courses. I make money when people want to scale their business. And so my way of building this is like I'm giving away literally everything that I work with my private clients on, essentially for free. Because if you complete the challenge and all the homework, you get 100% of the initial investment back into credit. So it's essentially a free challenge if you complete the homework, and the homework is designed to scale your business. But how I win is if you do really well, you scale your business, you create a consistent revenue stream. Maybe we do a deal together. Maybe we do 2 deals together. And for me, that's way more exciting than selling you information in a course. And there's going to be a lot of excitement around it because I'm literally going to show you how to scale the business. I'm going to hold nothing back. And there's no upsells into education or anything like that. It's all about, hey, if I get this information out there, Hermosi, right? Hermosi did this exact thing. If I get this information out there at cost or less than cost, basically giving away for free, if I do a couple of deals with people, it makes it worth my while. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Awesome. Now, when you say you're helping people scale their business, is there something in specific that you're helping them scale? I know you're covering a lot in your LandMan challenge.
Yeah. So the core premise of the challenge is in order to create consistency, we need structure, right? So it's like the Bruce Lee quote, which is, I don't fear the man that practices 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that practices one kick 10,000 times. And really the fundamentals of land investing are the same. So someone who's just starting can get the same amount of benefit into someone who is, I've done 25, 30, 40 deals. Why? Because you build the foundation of a 100-story skyscraper the same way. And so when I talk about scaling, I'm talking about we're building this foundation. You're going to come away with a foundational map of how to build a 10,000 square foot or a 10,000 story skyscraper. Now, whether you choose to do 1,000, 100, 10 stories, that's up to you. But the fundamentals of how to build that matter in every business. How do you create consistent marketing? How do you create a consistent process? How do you track the right KPIs? What are the right KPIs? What's the right CRM to use? What's the right systems to use in order to scale? Now, this applies to the person that's a one-man show or someone that wants to make $1 million a month because the foundation is the same. And that's what the challenge is about, building a foundational map to go where you want to go in your land business.
Great. So it's sort of self-deterministic where you want to get to with the challenge. And then how is this going to be delivered? Like, what can we sort of expect in terms of the cadence of this? Is this, help us understand how this is going to be delivered.
So it's weekly. There's a weekly call for about 2 to 3 hours for 4 weeks. So it's going to be a 2 to 3 hour call for 4 weeks. There's an opportunity to get through Fast Track, which is an additional call So if you want extra implementation help, there will be an additional call. But it's the initial call. You're going to get everything in the initial call. Come take a ton of notes, and then there's homework. Right? This is going to be like the college class that you took maybe a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, or maybe last year. But you're going to actually like to do the homework because you're going to make money as a result of it. So there's going to be homework for every single week. There's going to be, it's all going to be in a private school community. So you'll be able to interact with people who are doing the same exact thing that you're doing. And then every week we'll show up, we'll go live, we'll go over questions, we'll go over the homework, we'll make sure that you're actually implementing it so that there's accountability around the implementation of the homework. And so by week 1, you could say, hey, I want to brush up on my systems, right? Or I want to start building the systems. Week 2 gets a little bit more in depth. Week 3, we're talking about CRMs and we're talking about KPIs, and we're going to implement all that stack on these calls. And by week 4, you'll have this already made built out. It's like, man, when I would watch a course, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go crazy hard in the first week. So I'd watch all the videos, and then I find by week 3, I'm like, oh man, what were they saying in the week 1 videos? What were they saying, right? And so this is a challenge that's designed for you to apply and implement all the things that you're learning.
And then my final question about the challenge here is, who is this for? Is this for somebody who's new to land, somebody who's done land already, has an existing sort of operation going on? Who's this ideal for?
For sure. So I would answer that by saying I've been looking at personal trainers just because I kind of want to take my body, my health to the next level. And the question is who's a personal trainer for? Well, the same exact macros, sleeping, working out, it's going to be basically the same whether you're starting or you're hey, I'm Mr. Olympia, right? It's just that there's slight nuances, slight tweaks that you'll be able to pull out of it because you're I already know how to do a barbell bench press, but I know that maybe I need to change this angle a little bit, and we'll go into all those nuances in the challenge. And so, man, the challenge is for literally anyone that wants to start or scale their land business because it's going to be 4 weeks of intense personal training and implementation at whatever scale you are, because the same principles of how to scale a land business applies to someone who's just starting out to someone who is trying to take their business to multiple 6 figures a month.
Okay. This is pretty exciting. I'm excited to be a part of this as well. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but help us understand, how can people learn more about this challenge, Clay? I'm promoting this because there's a CRM element to it, but also because it's really interesting, Clay. You're really upfront about why you're doing this, and it's completely free. And I think there's huge value here for everybody who might be interested in this. So where can they find more about this LandMan challenge?
Yeah, so all over my social media, it will be more and more. There will be more and more in the links in all my bios. Obviously, down below in the show notes, there will be a URL exactly, but there will be the LandMan challenge on my website as well. But just go to my socials, look in the links in my bio, and there will be plenty of opportunity to sign up and ask questions. And man, it's going to be really good. It's going to be really excited. I'm not going to hold anything back, and I know that it's going to change the land business.
Okay, just for those that are listening, if they're not able to go to the show notes right now, what's your website?
clayhepler.io.
Okay, and they can find the LandMan challenge pretty easily on that page?
They will.
Okay, awesome. Clay, is there anything else that you want to make sure you get across on the show here?
Yeah, I think that you hear more and more in the social media in general that people are negative. Land business is getting harder. Life is getting harder. There's so many bad things going on in the world. And I'm here to tell you that everyone has the power individually to create the life that they want. Everyone does. And whether you're just starting this business out or you're trying to get more consistency and you're on the fence of whether or not I should keep going or keep doing it, it all comes down to you. And once you take ownership of your life and you say, I'm going to do this, I will do this, I will figure this out, man, that's the most empowering thing that you can possibly do for yourself. And so for anyone that's listening to this podcast, there's never been a better time to get into the land business, not because of anything other than the fact that there's so much access to information and implementation and data and CRMs and people like Jessey that has podcasts like this in order to take your life to the next level. So don't use the excuses from the average people, because the average American is fat, unhealthy, divorced, and has less than $1,000 in their bank account. Don't let the average define your life.
Wow, I really like that, Clay. One other thing I wanted to ask here. I noticed you read a lot. You brought up a lot of books, a lot of authors. Share with us a few books here. I'm sure some of the people that are listening right now are wondering, what book is he referring to? What's this? Are there 3 books that you could recommend, or maybe even just one?
I would say Leadership, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. That's a really good one. I would say for like running a company better, Who Not How. That's a cliche one. And then for sales, well, let me go for marketing. For marketing in general, there's a book from Perry Marshall. It's called 80-20 Sales and Marketing. And I would recommend that.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Clay, thanks for coming on the show. We sort of hopped around with a bunch of different things that we talked about and what's going on in your life and your business and the things you're seeing, as well as your project, the LandMan Challenge. I'm really excited about it. They can head over to clayhepler.io. They can sign up for that. By the time this show launches, I think you're going to have that ready for people to sign up. And we'll see you folks there that are listening on that challenge. Other than that, Clay, thanks again for coming on the show.
My man, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jessey.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.